My name is Michelle Chung. I'm the director of TRUE, a public-private partnership with the goal of helping organizations accelerate their adoption of technology to strengthen and improve productivity, efficiencies, and intelligence. And we know this can be an investment. This is where TRUE can help. Instead of going it alone or doing a long evaluation or figuring out the best way to execute, we can connect you with the organizations that have adopted solutions that you're considering. Through this network of like-minded individuals, we're leveraging each other's knowledge and experience to help each other get the most out of their technology and data, while creating an ecosystem where we can support each other. Some days you're giving solutions, some days you're benefiting from someone else's, and through it all, organizations in Hawaii strengthen through this collaboration. In supporting Hawaii's digitization, data, and innovation efforts, it supports TRUE mission of creating tech-enabled jobs in Hawaii. Today's webinar will be hosted by James Saulez, who will moderate a discussion with Premier Restoration Team, followed by an opportunity for you to ask questions. Please send in your questions during the session through the Q&A function, and we'll address them after the discussion. And with that, I'd like to start the program off by welcoming James. James is the president of KOA Process, a local digital transformation consultancy that helps businesses transform both their internal and their customer-facing processes. James has worked in transformation-related roles his whole career as CIO, CEO, COO, software developer, data scientist, and technology consultant in several sectors, notably financial services, service providers, manufacturing, logistics, and distribution. James has worked in South Africa, which is his home country, the UK, and the US, and he's been living here in Hawaii for close to 7 years. He's joined today by the Premier Restoration Team, who are customers of KOA Process, and I'll leave it to James to introduce his guests. Welcome, James.
Hi, thank you, Michelle. Thank you very much for having us.
We're glad you could be here.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for Anthony and Timon for joining us. As Michelle said, Anthony with Premier Restoration is a customer of ours. Anthony is the president of Premier Restoration. It's a full service mitigation restoration company, providing one-stop solutions for water, fire, mold, and wind damage to residential and commercial properties. He brings 20 years of industry experience to the PRH team. He joined the company in 2009. He aggressively grew the company from 8 employees to 55 in 2016. No mean feat that. And he was promoted to Senior Vice President of Operations. Anthony has since then unified Premier's 150 plus employees across 4 different islands. So a huge successful story there. And he's been at the helm of creating one cohesive team. He's joined today by Timon Fuchser, who's joined the company over a year ago. He graduated from the University of New Hampshire in 2015. Started his love for data automation working for a software company called Chatmeter. He joined over about a year ago, as I said, to help Premier with their transformation journey to becoming data-driven. He works with Power BI. It's one of the software tools that we've introduced to their business to increase data insight and analytics to help Premier's efficiency by showing actionable data. This includes vetting new data sources, as well as understanding and syncing existing software platforms. He communicates with all departments and leadership across the company to help build and improve KPIs, etc. He builds the dashboards for the teams, and he helps roll the whole effort out within the company. So yeah, thank you again, guys. Appreciate you guys being here.
Yeah, not a problem.
Right. I'm going to share my screen here. And let's kick things off. All right, so we're trying to be, today this is a fireside chat format, but we'd like to keep it interactive. So I'm going to talk through a little bit of theory and talk about the 2 main topics, which is what is a data-driven business, and why would you want to become one? And then how do you go about being becoming a data-driven business? So those are the two main topics of today, and yeah, I hope you guys get a lot out of it, and please participate at the end when we have Q&A. So just to kick off the first topic, what is a data-driven business and why do you want to be one? I'm often asked this question when I'm invited into businesses, and I tell people that a data-driven business is a business that has data and that uses it. And it sounds like a fairly obvious statement, but very often I come across companies that don't have data, and those that don't use most of it to their advantage. So being a data-driven business is really all about being able to analyze the past, seeing what went wrong, looking at trends, predicting the future, using data to inform day-to-day decisions in your everyday processes that are data-driven rather than gut feel, right? And again, businesses do tend to make a lot of gut feel decisions. Having IT systems doesn't necessarily mean that you use data. So it's really about using the data, looking at your key processes in the business and how data is currently driving those for you on a day-to-day basis. And also means, if you're a data-driven business, it really means placing constant effort on what data you don't have. So this is kind of what I see most often. I go into a business, for instance, that has a strong sales culture. They might have a strong sales team, lots of sales activity going on, and then you start asking questions, what data do you have in your business with respect to sales? So you will have sales data regarding, previous sales, how many sales you've made, who made the sales, what was the commission. And you start digging deeper underneath the surface and you say, well, what data do you have behind the activity of those sales? Do you know which salesman's doing what? How much effort is being put in across the sales team? Very often or not, it's a fairly one-sided view of sales. It's just looking at revenue, for instance. So I think that, data-driven businesses, just using the analogy or just using the sales department as an example, it takes a real closer look and says, what's really is all the data with respect to that process or activity that we should be looking at. Why do you want to become a data-driven business? These are the top things I hear from customers. I think more and more businesses business leaders are realizing that data is an asset. If you approached a business 15 years ago and said, hey, all that data in your ERP system that's been sitting there for 20 years, is it an asset to you? And people often look at me blankly and they go, sorry, what do you mean? And I'll say, well, they'll say, my ERP systems works great. It's old, but it works fantastically. And I'll go, fantastic, but what do you do with that data in there? And they'll say, well, we process all our sales in there. So that was 15 years ago. Now you start to have conversations. People have realized that data is an asset. They see other products. They see how other companies use their data more effectively than they do. Obviously, people want to become better at making decisions faster and, react to things happening within their business. There's a lot of marketing going on from business intelligence software providers also, which are starting to tell people that they can actually do this. Again, 10 years ago, you had to approach it. If I had to approach a small business and say, you can do this, people would laugh at me. I think people are now starting to understand that the tools exist to do this. There's the time saving when it comes to compiling reports. To me, these are often hidden costs. And funny enough, generally the more higher paid people in companies are the ones doing a lot of analytics. So your heads of department, your CFOs, those are the roles that are typically getting the job of getting data from different systems and compiling it to make sense of it, right? And it's not necessarily a good use of those people's time, right? And it costs. It ultimately is a true hidden cost, right? I think you also want to become a data-driven business because it makes your people more effective in their jobs and valuable to the business. Because if you look at a typical pie chart, for instance, of how people spend their time in a business, you want to make sure that they're not doing administrative things the whole time. And if being a data-driven business can help with that, you can then go through a data-driven project exercise, and you can go back to your roles and responsibilities of your people and say, hey, we've taken this off your plate. How can you be effective? How can you be a more effective team leader or department leader? People also want to shift the burden of doing analysis down the line. I guess the kind of traditional model is that a head of sales or a head of operations, he's the guy that has the report. He's analyzing stuff prior to a sales meeting or an ops meeting, and he's walking into the room and saying, hey guys, this is what I've discovered, right? And therein lies a huge inefficiency. People are walking into a room not knowing what their boss is going to tell them, and they're analyzing stuff on the fly that their boss has just analyzed, and they're interpreting in that, and they're reacting to it. And I think people want to start pushing that burden down the line so that when that meeting occurs, the people that are actually responsible for this data or for performing differently or changing the way they interact with their customers, they can actually react to it themselves and be their own analysts. And that might be a relatively new concept to somewhere like Hawaii, but that's certainly why some people are looking to be more data-driven. The other piece, kind of most importantly for me, if I have to pick one of these, is this accountability throughout the organization. So the concept of having greater sharing of data, it makes people more accountable to each other. And I'll share a story towards the end of this discussion today, where I've seen that in action in organizations that really feel comfortable with letting go of their data. It's not something you typically see, but it is starting to emerge. The other part of why people want to be data-driven is that it allows people's contributions to be visible. The amount of times I've sat with people lower down in the organization, and they view, and I talk about, hey, we had to help your company with data and better reports and dashboards. The first thing that comes to their mind is that, oh, well, Big Brother's watching me now, right? This is going to mean that my bosses have more data to hit me over the head with, right? And you go, well, yeah, that is part of the reason. We obviously want to be, an effective organization and know what's going on. But then you flip the conversation and you ask the guy who's the service guy, driving one of your trucks, right, out there in the field, and you say, well, what are you doing out here that's not getting recognized? What are you doing out here that's inefficient? That if you just were able to share and have a much more data-driven process that you're running, right? Because the guys out in the field, they're running the process. How would that change your life? How would that make you more effective? So I see that as a huge reason why people want to be more data-driven. Just before I finish off this section, this sort of opening comment on, what is a data-driven business and why do you want to be one? I'm not sure if you all on the call listened to Governor Ige's State of the State address, but he talked about Hawaii 2.0, about diversifying the economy a bit and becoming a tech hub, right? A Trans-Pacific tech hub. And I mean, a few things went through my mind as being a technologist. One of the things, but really what came to mind foremost was, well, is it really important for Hawaii to be attracting, startup companies to be software development companies? Or is it more important for the Hawaiian businesses, all of us, to be more savvy in the way that we digitally transform our businesses? And I think the latter is true, because that's, to me, is more important. If you want to become a more modern economy and the businesses become more sophisticated, it's up to the businesses themselves to go through this digital transformation. So, anyhow, that's I guess we didn't want to talk too much today theory about, you know, what is a data-driven business and how you become one. I want to flip away from this theory now and jump over to Anthony, president of Premier Restoration. You know, Anthony, we've worked with you, KOA Process has worked with you over the last year, right, on your data transformation journey. So let's kind of cut to the chase here. What is becoming more data-driven meant to Premier Restoration, and why did you embark on this journey in the first place? So we're going to give you a nice, healthy 10 minutes to run us through this. So you know, this is a really good story. I mean, your business has gone through huge growth, and becoming a data-driven business has been a huge part of it. So I think people are super interested in hearing your story. So yeah, over to you.
Right on. Kind of your, you know, as you were going through your initial few bullet points, James, I think the reason why you should do this is because it helps pull the emotion out of some pretty hard conversations. And I'll give an example to start with. So back in the day, if you were to go back to 2009, if our business was not performing, it went something like this, where I would be looking at, you know, some quarter end or some year end profitability, and I would be like, we didn't make enough money. And I'm sitting there and I'm talking with one of our project managers or one of our field techs, and they're like, what do you mean we didn't make enough money? I'm like, we didn't make enough money. And they're like, why? And I'm like, well, you didn't move fast enough. You didn't get things done fast enough. And they're like, oh crap, no way. Like, I hustle, I work really hard, and this and that and the other thing. And when you dig down to it, we never really understood why we weren't hitting the goals that we set forward. And then the inverse was true too. Like, we had some really, really solid quarters and some really, really solid years, and we didn't truly understand why. What was the makeup of those numbers that yielded a solid year, right? Because if we knew what made it up, we could replicate it and just do that every year. So for us, James, can you pull up the initial slide with all the little arrows and maps and software platforms? So if you were to go back to us in probably 2011, 2012, this is kind of what our data infrastructure looked like. So if you look at this map, you'll see that there's a software product called Dash that sits in the center of all of this. And this is our project management platform. And this platform basically was designed to take communications information via email, via tech notes from the field, some data from QuickBooks, some data from our estimating platform, which is called Xactimate. And, you know, this was the original BI, you know, circa 2011 BI dashboard. And at that time, it was state of the art, cutting edge. You know, everybody was like, oh my gosh, I can see all my stuff in one place. And so as we started to grow, and as we actually started to outgrow the functional limitations of that platform. And so I share this slide with everybody to say, like, I'm sure your businesses are very much so the same. You want to use the best software for the job. And so for us, for time tracking, T-Sheets does a great job. The guys can log into it on their phones. They can clock in, they can clock out, and everything else that we tried just didn't work that well. So that's the platform we use for time tracking. For us, for financial information, it's QuickBooks. For project management, it's Dash. For estimating, it's Xactimate. And these platforms don't really interact too well, and they don't talk back and forth. And so to understand how ours getting into T-Sheets has an impact in other areas in a financial way, there really wasn't a good way to see that until we started down our data, what are you calling it, James? The data transformation journey. I don't feel so transformed as I do enlightened. I feel more enlightened than transformed, but that's just me. And so what we did, this was a couple of years ago, we started down this road, and using Microsoft Power BI, we started to integrate all of these things. Can you go to the next slide, James? And this is what kind of drove out of it. And I gotta make that bigger on the screen. Slide the people over, make them smaller. Okay, so this is an example of a simple job management dashboard that we've created. No frills, there's no fancy pie charts, graphs, you know. Timon made it colorful at least, but if this was all up to me, it would just be numbers and columns, and I would be the savvy guy who read through it and understood what everything meant. But what's interesting about this is each of the columns, there's data that comes from 4 different places in this spreadsheet. So the total all hours column is actually data that's real time from T-Sheets, which is our time management platform. The job cost and labor cost columns are actually data that's real time from QuickBooks, our financial platform. The income estimate column is actually data that's real time from our project management platform, Dash, as well as a majority of the other information. And so what we're able to do is take a look at every single job that we have in production and have an idea of exactly where it is in real time. You know, one of the other columns here is sum of days last note. So this is a column that indicates to us, when was the last time we put information into our project management platform? I call this like lacking interaction. Hey, are my foremen, my foreman guys out there making sure that they're putting all their notes in? And so that's what the data transformation has allowed us to do, is to take information from a variety of different sources and smash it all together and see it in one place. And when you do that, I feel like, I don't know, like the layers of the onion get peeled back a little bit, and the mystery that is how you do what you do to make money and to provide a livelihood for your employees starts to become more real, because you understand all the functional inputs that go into it. Let's go ahead. We'll hit the next slide if you can, James. This is just another example. So what this is a bar chart over time of the total gross profit dollars that our estimators are earning. And this is by individual. So you can see these sections of the different colors of the bar chart represent different sections. Now you'll see there's lots of disparity here, because sometimes these guys have good days, sometimes they have bad days. You know, we're very much so an event-driven business. So unlike a normal general contractor, or like a painting contractor, where there's kind of always this static demand that exists in the marketplace, like everybody can always use a fresh coat of paint on their house. For us, you know, it goes up and down. And so for us to be able to take data across multiple estimators and multiple islands and see exactly, okay, what is the gross profit dollar contribution this week is huge to know whether or not we're on track. Let's see, I just want to review my notes. And so I think I touched on the, like, kind of the key component for us is, so you can take this particular graphic, we can put it in front of our team of estimators, and I go, hey guys, here's the data, take a look. And then I can go, you know, who can I pick on? I don't know. Let's just say it was Brett. He seems like he's probably slacking, right? Like if I look at Brett and I go, hey Brett, not having a good couple weeks, are you? And usually the way that conversation would go is it would come in without any supporting data. He'd walk into the meeting, kind of like James said, and I'd be like, hey, you're having a rough couple weeks. And he'd be like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm having a great week. I just had this awesome conversation with one of our customers. Whereas if he sees this data and he sees his contribution to the whole, and then he walks into that room, he goes, oh man, Anthony's gonna have a hard conversation. Like, he knows it's coming. And so what it really does is, when you talk about it through the lens of managing people and managing expectations of your staff, it pulls the emotion out of the room. So then that way you can have it, you can almost start at further down that road where you can have a productive conversation in how to change, or like a conversation in like why things aren't working, where are they struggling. And so that has been very, very powerful in just, like, I hate to say it's saving time because it makes me sound ignorant of people's feelings, which I'm definitely not. But in order for us to start further down that road, you know, those conversations now take a shorter amount of time, and it allows the business to pivot and move faster than it ever has.
Thanks, Anthony.
Did I get everything, James? Is that good?
You did great. Yeah, you're getting so excited. You've gone beyond your 10-minute slot. So we're gonna tap you off there. But yeah, thank you, Anthony.
I'm muting.
I mean, this is a good segue because this, I've done this stuff my whole career, and this is a journey, right? And I've got a great model, which is not mine. Often the best models are done by people who are really good at doing models. This is from a company called Mode, and we will share this guide with you afterwards. And it's a good way of looking yourself in the mirror as a business and saying, well, where am I on this journey towards data, maturity? And it has these 5 different stages here. I'm not going to dig into it in too much detail, but it's pretty self-explanatory. But it shows that it's an evolution. Your first project is never going to take you to stage 5. Stage 5 is a multi-year thing, because it deeply goes into the kind of cultural side of things, of how you become much more liberal with how you share data and make people accountable towards data. Anyhow, I'll run through the kind of different stages here. So, stage 1 is where you have, your people. You have no official data team. At least Premier, Premier's got that team with, Timon. There's no real processes around data. The tools, not many, analytical tools, certainly no centralized tools. And the culture, almost most importantly, the company mainly places work experience over instinct, and instinct over data. So really, if I find a business in this stage, the path forward is to talk about how do we start to establish a culture that says data is important to us, guys. We can't be a successful business carrying on going forward. And that will sort of hopefully drag you into the second stage, which is where you start to analyze your data through tools. Your data is still siloed by department, but you've at least started this journey, right? But generally, some departments have more robust data than others, but it's a good start, and lots of businesses find themselves in this kind of space. The third one is where you've got more sort of centralized data. You're starting to have some robust processes around your data, so that it's like a thing. It's not just a random project that's going on in the background. It's very structured. The company knows exactly what data is in its data environment and what's coming next, and everyone's pretty excited about it, right? So there's processes around that. Generally at this stage, you have a centralized self-service BI tool. So this is perhaps kind of where Premier is. And the culture shifts towards, people think of data as a tool to track performance, but nothing more. Maybe that's a harsh statement. And on these people, process, tools, culture thing, you aren't at the same stage in terms of these dimensions necessarily, but generally the first things people do is create dashboards to hit people over the head with, right? And that's kind of stage 3. So the focus going forward is to maybe more work on the cultural change, to consider how you can move forward with changing how people can interact with data, and etc. Then there's stage 4, a lot more proactive stuff. So you actually, the actions that your people take in the field and your managers take are materially influenced by the fact that you're in stage 4. You have a lot more experience in your tools. People are very familiar with them. They trust them. And the culture of the company starts to view data as a product. People aren't second guessing whether this data is, real or not. I guess there's an analogy there to what's going on in the country at the moment. But and it's your dashboards and your reports are not just about tracking performance, right? It's tracking lots of other aspects of what's going on in your company, rather than just the bottom line. And stage 5 is the sort of stereotypical nirvana stage, where you've got these what Mode calls citizen analysts. Like everyone down to your guy who's paid $15 an hour is interacting with with data. He trusts it. He is his own analyst, right? He's coming back to his boss, telling him that he's got a problem before his boss knows about it, and it's all thanks to the data that's being presented to him. You know, so that's, you know, and the company's culture, it's that data is a critical asset, right? People are calling each other out for not putting in good data and not trusting data, etc. So as I said, there's a great guide that we'll send you to this, and it's got a lot more meat, and hopefully you can use this as a guide for yourselves. So if I had to kind of look at Hawaii, I've been here 7 years, but I've walked around businesses, both large and small. I've seen in large corporates, people walking around with trolleys with reports, printed out reports, delivering them to different floors in their building. I've seen businesses with a lot of data that's not captured, and therefore, you know, and this is not necessarily a Hawaii thing, and maybe we're worse than other states, but there's no point in beating ourselves up. But honestly, lots of people are more than likely at this stage here. Michelle, could you try get a quick poll going? And if people are able to reply, that's great. Just off the top of your mind, everyone, you know, where do you think your business is? Just if you don't mind quickly asking, answering that poll that's popped up on your screen. We're not going to call you out or anything. So if you are able to share a gut feel instinct of where you are, please go ahead and do so now. And Michelle will tell you them for up. Anthony, where do you think you guys are? Just gut feel.
2.8.
Yeah.
Like we're getting into stage 3 right now. We're definitely not proactive. We're not in the proactive analytics side. We're definitely like, oh my gosh, that number's bad. We got to do something about it. But yeah, that's where we're at. Yeah.
So for full disclosure, Anthony, I didn't talk about this prior to this meeting, and I had you guys at 2.6. Honestly, that's, you know, we're working very kind of tightly with each other here. And here's the stats. I can see them. Can everyone else see them? Hopefully, that seems.
Who's the stage 5 guy? I want to talk to him.
Stage 5 guy, I'd love to talk to, and he should be sharing stuff for sure. That's awesome to see. So thanks, Michelle, for doing that. Super enlightening to know that, you know, we're all not alone in terms of where we are in our stages, right? So Anthony, pivoting back to you, just your sort of second question for you and Timon. So this is a journey, right? You guys are not it wasn't a once-off exercise. You're clearly aware of where you are in this continuum. Are you close to reaching the end, and what's next on your roadmap?
In short, I would say no. We're nowhere close to reaching the end. You know, we made the commitment to bring Timon on. What? Almost? Is it 2 years yet? It's getting close. It's not.
Yeah, it's 1.5, I'd say.
1.5. Okay, so we made the commitment. This is a position, and I share that. This is a position we added, and it is not going anywhere. In fact, we have done a lot to make sure that Timon has more support as he's continued to grow in his role with Premier. So kind of the answer of what's next is, I'm really looking forward to getting out of the reactive analytics phase of things and starting to transition into the more proactive analytics side. And most of that is the pressure of working in a business that is inherently reactive by its nature. I'm just excited to have whatever little tiny tools for prediction I can have. Timon, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I mean, I think starting off, it's never really going to end. Premier is super innovative. We're kind of at the frontier of pushing the data. So there's always going to be new data sets. I know right now, for example, we have Encircle app, which is a data set or a software that the guys in the field are using. They really like it, but again, it doesn't really want to communicate very well with some of our other platforms like Dash, and that's going to be another build out. Those are all things that we're going to be constantly working towards. Currently where we are, I mean, there's a lot of actionable data. we have the managers all have platforms, all have dashboards. So each different department knows the data that they are looking at and understands their KPIs, but that's just from a leadership perspective. And there's still a lot of teaching there to be done. So we're kind of at the beginning phase of that. And what the goal is by 2021 is to push that down to get the entire company to get used to looking at these dashboards, get individual dashboards built out for each employee, all the way down to as small of the level as we can get it, and have it be sent out automatic daily, just so they know what their KPIs are, so they understand what they're looking at. So everybody gets used to looking at the data. Exactly what James was saying about building the culture. It's very important. Getting office dashboards out on TVs that are displaying little dashboards where the managers can now do little competitions, using the data to now get people excited about getting competitions going, getting maybe even putting a little reward in there. And that's how we're going to clean up our data, but also get really start changing the culture so everybody is more data driven, is more comfortable looking at Power BI, not just where we're at right now with the leadership. We're going to trickle that down the funnel.
Great.
And,
yeah,
and I will say one of the fun things, sorry, James, one of the fun things is when you get a dashboard and you've got it dialed in and you put it in front of your team, and then you just do nothing and watch them fix like 5 problems overnight because there's that data and accountability. That's always really, really cool.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I've got another customer where we're doing screens in the warehouse to replace whiteboards, which managers would very infrequently update with KPIs. We now have screens showing stuff live from Power BI. And what's happening is that guys on the side are saying, hey, can I get that on my phone? I'm kind of super interested in that. And it's taken the company by surprise because they thought that this performance tracking, screens that were being shown on a huge 55-inch screen in the warehouse was kind of be a lot of, it was going to take time for the team to digest and get used to. But actually people are having sidebar conversations saying, hey, how can that be more tailored towards me? So, that's really encouraging. And it just shows you that people want data. All right, great. I'm going to pivot to the next section here where we talk about the how. We obviously wanted today to be to cover not the what, but just also the how. So these are the sort of 4 steps that are most important. This is not a very specific detailed methodology per se, but these 5 steps are involved in every data transformation project, certainly that I've ever been involved in. The first one is determining what data you have and don't have. My bad. Oh no, I've got all I've killed. Sorry. Determining what data you have and don't have. Then figuring out how you're going to get to that data. For the data that you don't have, I said it earlier, you've either got data or you don't. And I think what comes out of this first step is a realization of what the data that you don't have. And therefore you need more apps. You need to enhance your apps to create more data that is reliable and structured. So that's part of what we do for customers is we build them apps because they don't have enough data, or we get them cloud apps going. But so I won't talk about this in enhancing existing apps further. But once you figure out, what data you have and how you're going to get it, then it's about transforming your data. Now, this is the part to me that most businesses don't necessarily, business leaders who are not technology focused, understand the power of what you can do in terms of transforming data. So I'm going to dig into that a little bit. Then we're going to talk about building reports and dashboards, and then how you use and share this information. So first kind of thing there is I'm going to share this template with you. It's not a template we use with every customer. It's super simple, but if you start with something simple like this, and you've never done this type of thing before, something like as simple as this spreadsheet here is more than enough to understand what data that you have. I've just got a few data points on here. This is a fictitious business, and we're looking at sales and a process in sales called lead generation. Is it data driven? It's yes. This company's got salesforce.com. They're capturing data well in there. And what you also do during this exercise is you don't only say what data you have, you say which of it is structured versus unstructured. So an unstructured data is text messages between your team or emails, right? That's kind of unstructured data as opposed to it exists in Salesforce. You also at this stage want to comment on the accountability and the accuracy and the effort that goes on behind this process of maintaining this data. And then you look at the action stuff. So yes, you might have great reports and stuff, but are people, are managers actually using this data in their day-to-day lives? I can't tell you how many businesses I've built, hundreds of dashboards for, and I go do an audit in their processes and I say, when do you use this report? And your manager will say, well, I love it. And I go, I know you love it because you told me, you paid me, but when and how do you use it? So I've got some other examples here in the sales lead generation world where they're doing good on lead generation capture, but they aren't doing well on capturing the salesperson's activities. So hopefully this is a good, is a useful tool for you guys, if those of you who are literally starting this journey here. And this is something that any consultancy would, this type of thing would be something that any consultancy uses to walk through this. I'm just being cognizant of time here, but Anthony, just very quickly, anything that you guys discovered when you were looking at what data you did and didn't have?
I think the biggest thing that was missing was like segmented time data from the field. Like we had total hours, but where were those hours actually being spent?
Okay, and that's
helpful
hugely important for your business, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Next stage is getting to the source of your data. So businesses generally have a bunch of apps, like Anthony explained earlier, right? You have apps, they have databases. Some of those apps have APIs, which are just basically methods of getting to those applications, not through the screens that come out the box with those apps. And then people have a bunch of files, right? Spreadsheets, PDF files, it's all information. So the idea is that you need to get this stuff on the left-hand side all the way through into your centralized business intelligence tool. Now, the good news is that there's so much stuff that can make this job easy. So, I mean, KOA Process use Power BI, and Power BI has a bunch of out-the-box connectors. They're literally hundreds of connectors that it has. It'll just connect you to your system. If your system's, I've done systems, I've connected to systems that were implemented in 1982. Old JD Edwards systems running off green screens. Everything has got a database, and anything can be reached. Here's a visual of Premier Restoration sources. They have multiple databases, SharePoint text files. Everything can be reached. So don't be concerned that you believe that your systems are closed. We have one of Premier systems is a closed system. It has no API, it has no access to the database, but we were still able to get stuff out of there and get it across. Timon, do you want to just talk? Sorry, I'm just cognizant of time here again. Do you want to just talk quickly to some of these methods that maybe surprised you or thought that it would be harder to get from?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, looking at some of the ones we use, obviously direct database access would be the Think Easy, which was our timesheets, because we needed to have timesheets coming directly from that. But I think the most important one, for the sake of time, that I want to talk about would be Dash. I thought what was really cool with that is we did an automated import of a CSV, and it was really cool because when there's a will, there's a way. And what happened is we were able, Dash is actually quite closed source. So you don't have like an open API or public API where you can just pull this information directly. So we were able to have the email sent out to us like on an automatic basis. And that actually went through a flow in Power Automate to then update that CSV file, which James was just talking about. And that was really influential to me because I got to kind of learn from James as, sometimes the data doesn't seem like it wants to work in the most efficient way, but you can usually somehow make it happen. It just might not be the most direct way. And it's worked beautifully.
Great. Next step in the process is transforming your data. So you've got all this data. There's a bunch of techniques that data scientists like myself use. You have to cleanse data, you have to scrub it. You can't just assume that it's all clean, right? So you're going to do that. You can merge data. But merging data is probably the biggest enlightenment here. So you can take data from Salesforce, which shows your salesman's activities, but Salesforce doesn't necessarily know about how much money you're making off the projects that those salespeople are working on. So you can create relationships between this data. You can segment your data. So just because your source system only provides for you name of the product that was sold, how many units, and what was the sales price, it doesn't mean that you can't augment and segment that data yourself to turn it into something more useful. So typical things that we do is we look at age of clients. How long has the client been a customer of the business? What is the size of the job? So you start to create these segments and you start to say, okay, well, what is our profitability by age of client? What's our profitability by some other segment? And that data doesn't exist in your source systems. You can create it. Other examples of that is businesses typically do budgeting for teams or for departments or islands. They don't put them in any system. It's in some CFO spreadsheet, right? You can take those budgets and mix it with this data here so you can see how you're tracking against budget. So those are things. Measures and custom fields, that's more sort of advanced stuff where you want to look at year-to-date figures or comparing figures from a previous time record, from a previous time period. Again, you can't necessarily find those reports in your core system, in your systems where you got this data from. It just doesn't have it. It doesn't have that power, right? You bring it into a tool like Power BI or many others on the market, and you can suddenly do this stuff. And then there's the real, fun stuff when you get to the statistical predictive analytics, where you're looking at your data and you're saying, tell me what's going to happen in the future. Tell me some interesting stuff that's going on in my data. So Timon, yeah, Timon or Anthony, anything that really stuck out for you here when we went through this exercise with you on transforming data?
I think for me, just being able to layer data from various sources on top of each other and get it all in one spot saves you from going back and forth and being like, all right, what's real? You can look at one source and be like, okay, I know what.
Got it. Timon, anything from your side quickly?
Yeah, no, I think what was cool is transforming the data about using project costing. I know that was an issue that Anthony was talking about getting basically timesheets. We had timesheets, which was an issue, which was in QuickBooks, so it wasn't approved yet. So we kind of needed to get project costing into our data set, which I thought was very interesting to kind of see how we get that done. And the main question was, what's the ultimate source of truth? And I remember Anthony talking about that, and that's always the data that Anthony's looking for. He wants the source of truth. So once you kind of figure that out, where you need to get the most influential data, you can then, bring that data in and transform that data into the correct way in Power BI, and you manage the correct relationships through a unique identifier. And now all of a sudden you have your timesheets connected with your QuickBooks, connected with a payroll. We ended up putting payroll in there to get job costing, and that ended up being I gave Anthony true labor cost per job in that right. Particular situation, which is what he was asking for. So, that could be by project estimator, by foreman, by anything in those situations.
Great. So last step in the process is, second last step is building and sharing BI visuals. All these tools, Power BI, Tableau, Mode, pick your tool. They're all brilliant at self-service analytics. Basically, self-service analytics is you don't need an IT guy to build your reports. Power BI uses like a pivot table format. If anyone's used a pivot table in Excel before, everything in your data universe is shown on the left here. You choose your visual. What do you want? A pie chart? You want a map? Whatever it is, and you literally drag and drop across. And that's where the real exciting bit comes. And funny enough, this is the quickest part of this. People look at this stuff and they go, wow, that must be taking you ages to do. And you go, no, the other steps took way longer. This is easy and you can do this yourself. And that really is true. And this is where technology's come a long way in the last few years. When it comes to building and sharing your BI your business intelligence, again, these tools are fantastic, right? We just think of being able to log into a website and look at your dashboards. That's just one of the methods that you have. You know, they all have mobile apps, but then you can get clever and start to embed this analytics into websites, into your existing apps. So you might have an existing app that you use out in the field that doesn't tell you much about what's going on, but you need a really rich visual from Power BI. You can just embed that into your app. You can get alerts. So you can set up rules in Power BI that says, hey, send me an alert where when customers in this certain segment owe us more than $10,000, and you'll just get that, you know, alert sent to you. These tools let you analyze data more deeply in Excel, and some of the other cool things that you can put them into third-party apps like Teams or Slack, so that you don't need to send people. You just have a Teams channel, and that's a dedicated team for a channel for the sales team, for instance, and they just go to Teams, and the latest dashboards are just there. You know, no one needs to click any buttons. They're just there. So when people have meetings about those things, they've already talked about it in Slack or in Microsoft Teams. They've already had a conversation. They've given their excuses. They've given their reasons, whatever it is. And then you arrive at a meeting, you've got a really productive meeting. So they're very innovative ways of, you know, sharing what you have in your business in intelligence world. Ultimately, as I said earlier, the ultimate goal is kind of democratization of data, right? So that it's not just the manager's tool. It's just one quick story. I had a customer in South Africa who had a weekly town hall with his staff, and they had a BI analytics tool which we helped them with. And he said, "Hey James, we were kind of signing off the final document for it to go live." He said, "Hey, stick around. We want to show you what we, you know, how we've been using your stuff that you built us." They shut down. They just pulled everyone out the factory. They just kept the paint being manufactured by a few guys. 100 people get into a room. They got this lottery system where they pull out a random number. The guy who got chosen that day was a forklift driver, and he ran the meeting. He went through everyone's KPIs. There's this guy driving a forklift asking the head of marketing why, you know, what's the reason why the marketing leads or the lead KPIs were not so good. And it was an amazing culture to see that if data is shared and everyone's accountable to it, then it belongs to everyone. So that was, you know, just one kind of anecdotal story of getting to that end state of democratization of data. Anthony, what do you think about that for Premier? Could an old-fashioned Hawaiian company get to that stage?
I will tell you that some of my field guys are the ones that are the loudest when the data indicates we're heading down a dark path. You know, like my pickier old school guys that just hate failing. When I've given them the tools, they're the ones that are like, "Brah, no, we can't do this because the number says we're going down a dark path." So yeah, and it happens quick.
Great. All right, guys. Sorry, we kind of rushed a bit there. We were supposed to leave 15 minutes for Q&A, but Michelle, over to you, and we at least have some time left for questions.
Yeah, we can tackle one or two of them. Thank you guys for sharing that story. I think that learning how different organizations not only use the data, but really embrace that culture is so important. So we have a question from Michael. He's asking, there are situations where transformation and becoming data-driven organizations began as a grassroots effort without the buy-in and support of a skeptical senior management team. Have you ever seen bottoms up? I guess bottoms up versus top down.
Yes, I have. Typically, if you're a consultancy and you're brought in to help, I've seen it quite often where the guys at grassroots level are kind of waiting for you to come speak to them, right? And actually they know more about it than the managers who called you in to do the consulting. And they're actually more prepared for the conversation and can tell you more. So I don't see that as a bad thing. I see that as a very encouraging thing, and one that could actually speed up that transformation. It means that the people at the lower rungs of the organization want this stuff, and they're not necessarily going to fight it.
Oh, that's great. Michael, I hope that answered your question. And then you mentioned in the beginning, James, that data has a stigma sometimes of uncovering dirty laundry. I just wanted to ask Anthony and Timon whether you guys, or how you guys, whether you faced it and how you overcame something like
that. I think for me, it's the inherently, so I'll answer it with kind of a little bit of a story, but the guy, you know, our staff, like we have a relatively bread and butter staff. Like, you know, most of my guys just like to hunt and fish on the weekend, you know, probably drink too much beer, you know, like just normal, average, everyday folks. But, you know, they all take a certain sense of pride in showing up every day in what they do and the product they produce. And so while originally, yeah, you know, there's always some skepticism, if you start with why and you illustrate to everybody, like, look, the reason why we want to do this is so then that way we can become better. Like, I don't want to introduce anything that takes away. I only want to introduce data and information that helps us improve and do better at what we're already doing, because we've already proven that we're successful. We just need to stay ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, I think on my end, a lot of times when I find these reports, it's about the way that you look at them too, and the way that you portray them to the team. Like, you shouldn't be like, first of all, you should never be really excited when it's something crazy. Like, people management's not going to enjoy seeing that. It's just something that you discovered that is now important. Don't go in, you know, with the wrong attitude. And also go in and tell the management team, being like, hey, they didn't know this. You know, you can't yell at something if it hasn't been discovered before. If it's data that nobody knew about, it should just go in as a learning perspective, and the why it's important, just exactly what Anthony said.
And maybe I'll end with this last question. A lot of people manage their organizations by gut. You know, you have like 30 years of experience. I manage by gut. Sometimes, I guess I just wanted to know, do you get that as a pushback? Oh, this data is different than what my gut is telling me, and how you handle stuff like that?
80% of the time, the data will support what your gut already knows. What you really need is, when your gut's wrong, you need something that puts you in check and force you to double check what your gut's telling you. You know, it's not the decisions that your gut makes that are right that are the problem. It's the one that your gut makes that's wrong that's the problem. And really, that's what the data does. Is it, moreover, it just stops you from going down a dark path that you should have no business doing anyway.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Any last words? Anything to leave the audience with before we close up?
Yeah, well, just first of all, thank you to True. Obviously, you guys are doing a fantastic job at doing this for the state of Hawaii. So thank you.